The 1970s was not known as one of the better decades in American history. The economy was at a downfall, war was amongst us, and American culture was changing. The economy had said to be in the worst condition since the Great Depression. Due to war, debt was rising, tension was high, and economic growth was slow. With oil prices skyrocketing, the United States and other countries preciously rationed their usage of oil products. The United States had heavily depended on Middle East for oil. In 1973, Middle Eastern countries proclaimed an oil embargo on the United States. The crisis got so bad that customers with license plates ending with even numbers could only purchase gas on dates of even numbers, and the same goes for odd numbers as well. Inflation rose to double digits, lowering the standard of living to fifth in the world. Also, the United States unemployment rate rose to 9%, and productivity dropped drastically as foreign manufacturers started producing and selling more. The public was concerned about the economy and turned to the government and political leaders for help.
The most known political figure up until 1974 was President Nixon. He faced rough times with war on communism while dealing with political scandals. In 1974, President Nixon resigned and President Ford took over. After taking office in a horrible economic situation, Ford dealt with a lot of public discrepancy. Later, Ford pardoned Nixon from a scandal, and foreign policy was characterized by an increase in rule of Congress. After Ford's short 895 days in office, President Jimmy Carter was elected. President Carter was in term for 4 years. He dealt with a new sense of terrorism brought to the United States and a few crises. He created the Department of Energy and Department of Education, along with a national energy policy to help with the energy crisis. He took his term into the 80s but lost the election to Ronald Reagan. Another important figure during this time was Reverend Jim Jones. He was leader of a cult called the People's Temple and influenced thousands of lives. He took 900 of his followers to Jonestown, Guyana, and gave them a poisonous beverage to drink. His followers drank it and soon died. Jim Jones killed most American civilians ever, besides September 11, 2001. That was not a natural disaster.
With the troops all coming home from Vietnam, the Watergate scandal, and the Pentagon Papers, everybody was suspicious of whether or not we could trust our government. People started to fight for rights they previously did not have. In Roe v. Wade, abortion was legalized in the U.S. The soldiers coming home from Vietnam fought to change the voting age, which was eventually lowered to 21 to 18. People hoped that uneasy tension would cease after we left Vietnam, but we found ourselves in more conflicts than before. It seemed like everybody was against America. In 1973, a group called OAPEC put an oil embargo on the United States. During the time, Iran was having a revolution to throw out their leader, who was supported by the U.S. As the oil supply started to drain, people went in a frenzy to get oil. With oil being scarcely, nuclear power started to become much more useful. However, when nuclear power plant had a meltdown in DePaul County, Pennsylvania, people started to worry about nuclear power. In 1978, a group of Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Iran, taking over 50 people hostage. President Jimmy Carter responded by putting an embargo on Iranian oil. This was not very smart, however. It was only managed to worsen the oil crisis we were in.
The events from the 1970s and the decades before led to the inspirations of American culture in the 1970s. The Apollo 13 was the seventh manned mission in the American Apollo space program and was intended to land on the moon, but later failed its mission because of an oxygen tank rupture. Also, the first test tube baby was made in this decade. Louise Brown was developed from an artificially inseminated egg implanted in the mother's womb. Music was another big part of this time period. The decade experienced the breakup of the Beatles and the death of Elvis Presley, who were both major rock influences. Disco was a genre of music that was popular in the 1970s. It was widely a part of New York and Philadelphia's nightclubs. Movies had a major comeback in the 70s. Star Wars was one of the highest profit films of all time, and is still very popular today. Superman also made it into the box offices that decade. The fashion in the 70s was influenced by many of the hippies from the 60s. Men wore their hair shorter length, while some people wore their hair short and in a bob. The outfit of choice usually included bell-bottom pants, gypsy dresses, and platform shoes.